Hello everyone, and welcome to my Stamina Dragonknight build for the Elder Scrolls Online. This is a two-hand and bow burst build. It's got 5.5k weapon damage, almost 60% crit, and it hits like a truck and has so much sustain. This build is incredibly mobile and it shuts down ranged opponents really hard. This is truly the build that Tiber Septim himself ran when he created the Empire with his Iron Fist. This is the Dragonborn build, guys. It is such a fun build to play. Honestly, this is the strongest Stamina Dragonknight build that I've ever played. I've never played a Stam DK that I think is better than this, and it's just so good. I mean, look at this damage. Look at the durability. We're just taking these guys down inside their own group. And we're rocking all of these offensive stats with both of our ultimates being armor ignoring. So we get to cut through our opponent's armor on this build. So it's really good against killing tanks too. So if you guys enjoy this build, hit that like button at any time. If you guys are new here, hit that subscribe button. We got lots of content on the channel, including other builds. We've got top 5 PvP commentaries from you guys, my own PvP commentaries, and we feature community builds. So be sure to check that stuff out. And of course, we have got lots of PvP footage of this build in action in the video as well. Alright guys, let's take a look at that build. So, to begin, I am a Dark Elf on this spec. Now, Dark Elf I don't think is the ideal race for this build. I just have a Dark Elf Dragonknight on the live server. I think that Bosmer, Orc, and Nord are your best race choices for this build. Bosmer and Orc because they are fantastic medium armor stamina race choices with the damage and the max stat that they get, and both getting some form of speed. And then I say Nord because we're a Dragon Knight, and Nord is just going to help give you higher ult gen, which is a big deal for Dragon Knight. It's just going to play into our sustain as well. So Nord if you want a little bit bulkier version of this build. Dark Elf is of course a fine option though. Dark Elf does a good job on Stam and Magicka builds. So, taking a look at our stat page, guys, we have got 12k Magicka, 24.5k HP, and nearly 28k Stamina. Now, I did want to say that we have the Emperorship Alliance bonus, so our hit points are a little bit higher than they should be. Normally, we'd be sitting around 23k HP on this build. Now, the max stat on this spec is, of course, pretty low. We don't have the highest max stat, and it's just reflective of the fact that we're playing a high sustain, high regen build. So this means that this build is not really suitable for a no CP campaign. If you want to play this spec in no CP, I would recommend going for robust instead of infused on the jewelry. It'll help bulk up your max stam, and that should help this build function a little better. Now, taking a look at the regen side of things, we are going to buff up with the potion as well. We have got 1100 Magicka recovery, 745 health, and 1600 stamina recovery. So pretty good sustain across the board. Nothing here is too crazy high, but we've got a good mix between the Magicka and stamina recovery. On this build, Wings is such an important ability, and so is our Fragmented Shield for the major mending, so we need to have some good mag sustain on it in order for this to be an effective build. Of course, the Tripods will play into the sustain, and we've got Battle Roar, and then of course when we apply poison damage, which we have quite a bit of poison damage on this, we have a chance to poison our opponent, and that will give us stamina recovery as well. So the sustain on this build is actually really good, and it just plays kind of like a Dragon Knight. You'll get kind of spaghetti sustain bars when you play a Dragon Knight, and that's just kind of how they play due to Battle Roar. So taking a look at our weapon damage on this build, fully buffed, we have got 4.7k weapon damage on 58% crit on this build. This is a big deal. We also have the bow enchant too, so we go up to nearly 5.5k weapon damage on nearly 60% crit. That's a lot of damage. The amount of damage that this build does is very similar to my Stamina Templar Ghost build. And yeah, that major minor brutality really allowing us to push very high weapon damage on this build. And then of course our crit rate at nearly 60%. This is fantastic for our damage, it's fantastic for our healing, and of course we have the minor force buff, so this is going to deal a lot of crit damage too when we land those crits, which are going to be very consistent. Now taking a look at the armor on this build, we have got pretty nice base resists at 21k and just about 21k physical resist, and then we've got 2100 critical resistance. So not too crazy defensive stats here, but this is a very fast, very kitey build. We have a very strong reflect. We have a lot of immunity to snare and immobilize. So we're going to stay really mobile, and you have to use a lot of block and roll dodge on this build as well, as it really plays that medium armor style. So for the sake of this build, I think that these resists are great. And this build is also sporting a ton of healing power with our high weapon damage and the major mending. So we really rely on the fact that we're kitey and we can easily heal away whatever wounds we take in order to stay alive. Now, for the buffs that we have on this build, I am actually a vampire, but you shouldn't be a vampire for this spec. It's definitely not needed at all. So just ignore that. That's just kind of making my health recovery a little bit worse. For the Mundus Stone, we have the Serpent Mundus. This is important for the sustain, and I went with Serpent because we just did need that extra bit of stam sustain, and that's why I say if you're going to play this build in no CP, you might want to add a little bit more sustain as well to it. And then for the food we're using, we have got the Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch. This is a fantastic food for this build. We get max health, we get health recovery, stamina, and magicka recovery. So great for this spec to get all of these recoveries. And then for the potions that we're using on this build, we have got the Essence of Health, returning all resources and our health and giving us a recovery bonus to everything too. So we get a nice even amount of sustain across the board from our potion and food. Really good for this spec. Now, taking a look at the gear that we're running on this build, guys, the first set that we have is Slime Craw. And this is a really great set for DK in general because they don't have the Minor Berserk buff. We get the crit as well, which is really good for this build because we have such a high crit rate. So really important for that burst build, I think, that we have the Slime Craw on. The next set that we have is one of, if not my favorite medium armor set right now, the Griffin set. This is going to give us weapon crit, weapon damage, and then after dealing direct damage, we gain minor force and minor expedition for 3 seconds, 10% crit damage, 10% movement speed. Both of these are so important for this build. The crit damage is going to allow us to hit super hard with our crits, and then the movement speed bonus is great just playing into that medium armor defensive playstyle. And then the next set that we have is Hunding's Rage. And we actually only run Hunding's Rage on the Greatsword bar and in the jewelry. I actually picked Hunding's Rage because it offers both crit, max stam, and a big whopping amount of weapon damage. And DK has a really varied offensive kit with lots of poisons, etc. So I couldn't go for Sword Singer or anything here because I really wanted my dots to be strong on this build as well. So that's why I've gone for the Hunding's Rage here. And then on our back bar, we actually run the Black Rose Bow. This is going to give our primary stun Magnum Shot an additional damage over time portion based on 50% of the damage it dealt. And the duration of this dot is increased if the opponent is further away from us when we stun them too. This is a really great bow for this build, specifically the DK, because we don't have that stamina-based class stun. This is going to make our stun not only a good stun, but a great setup dot as well. Now for the traits on this build, I of course have gone with Infused on the Black Rose Bow. The weapon spell damage enchant, this is going to push you a lot of extra damage when you set your combo with the bow, starting with the stun or the poison injection. And we have major minor brutality, so we get a whopping amount of weapon damage from this, almost 700 weapon damage from having this buff up. And then on the Greatsword, we have gone with the Nirnhoned Greatsword. And Nirnhoned, of course, to increase both our damage and healing by increasing our base weapon damage. And for the enchant on here, I went with the Disease Enchant. I think you can go with either the Disease or the Poison Enchant. Both have their own merits. The Poison Enchant, of course, is going to make it easier for you to poison an enemy, therefore playing into your stamina sustain. But the Disease Enchant can apply the minor healing debuff, so it's up to you what you want to go for here. I actually think the Poison Enchant is the better way to go between the two. Now, taking a look at the traits on our jewelry, we've got full infused jewelry with weapon damage enchants. Now, I actually went with the Hunding's Rage jewelry here, and the reason I did that is because it's very cheap to craft infused jewelry now, and it's a lot more difficult to transmute Griffins to infused. Now, I know this means we'll get a little bit less weapon damage because we don't have the golden jewelry, and it's very expensive to get. However, this is still a really good option, and it's still better than Robust. You're still getting more stat out of this, especially because DK gets major minor brutality. We get a lot of damage out of these rings. If I had this upgraded to gold, we could pack on over 50 additional weapon damage to this build, though, so it would be really nice to upgrade this. Send money my way, please. And then for the gear, guys, we have got a mix of well-fitted and impenetrable. And I think we've got 4 well-fitted and 3 impen on this build. I think this combination is great. We actually have quite a bit of sustain. DK has a lot better sustain than our regens suggest, just due to the Battle Roar and the poison passives that they have. And the impen is really valuable for PvP, of course. For the enchants here, I've gone with full maximum stamina enchants. I think this is the best way to go for CP PvP because you want to push the damage and healing as high as possible. We don't really need a massive hit point pool. As long as you're quick on your feet, actively blocking and reflecting attacks, you shouldn't get bursted down too easily on this spec. But if you do want to go for a little bit more HP and a little bit more Magicka, especially if you're not a Dark Elf that gets the bonus to Magicka like me, you can go for a couple pieces of the Hacky Joe on your big pieces here, and that'll help bulk up your other stats at the cost of a little bit of stam. Alright, so let's take a look at the abilities that we're using on this build. We're going to start on the Greatsword bar, and this is our primary damage and burst bar, and I'm going to buff up so you guys can see the tooltips on these abilities as we go through them. The first ability we have is Executioner, nearly a 6k tooltip, the primary execute for this build. I went with a single target morph because this is a totally single target build, so we don't really need that splash. The next skill that we have is Critical Rush, coming in at a 7.4k tooltip. That's super great. We, of course, have the Minor Force buff as well, so we're going to hit nice big crits on this build, too. A guaranteed critical strike increasing in damage by 40% based on the distance, so a really nice gap close as well. And we are running Magnum Shot, and Magnum Shot's going to put distance between you and the opponent, so it makes the crit rush hit even harder because we can set up a nice crit rush after the Magnum Shot. Now, the next skill that we've got for you guys is the Flames of Oblivion, and this is slotted for that Major Savagery buff on our front bar to give us that crit bonus, and it is also here for that burst, 8,600 flame damage every 5 seconds. This is really nice because we can use this at a distance and then gap close onto the target, and the Flames of Oblivion will proc and deal damage to them as well. So it just allows us to have a heavier single spike when we bring the hammer down. Now, the next skill that we've got is Rally, and this is going to be your primary access to Major Brutality, as well as a great heal over time and your strongest burst heal on this build. This is actually the only burst heal I run on this build, and Rally is a fantastic heal. When you play this build, we have got Rally Vigor on it, but if you're kiting properly, you shouldn't use Vigor too often. You should try to only refresh your Rally and go for the Vigor when you really need the extra healing power. So Rally is kind of your primary heal for the spec in general. Now, the next ability that we have is Volatile Armor, and this is your primary armor buff for the build. It's really nice because it also has a large radius and works really well as a AoE stealth detect. So you can pull Nightblades out of stealth easily with this ability. It will deal the 4k magic damage over 10 seconds, which is not a massive tooltip, but it is nice for that stealth detect portion of it. And then finally, while the armor is active, you return magic damage to any enemy that hits you with a direct attack, just adding further to the damage of this build. And then for the ultimate, guys, we have gone with Onslaught, and I'm going to buff up the Onslaught tooltip as well for you guys. We're coming in at a 21k Onslaught on this build. Onslaught, of course, is going to ignore your opponent's armor and give you the amount ignored for 8 seconds. And if you get a killing blow with this ability, it refunds the ultimate cost. Onslaught on a Dragonknight pretty much means that if you can land the killing blows with this ability, you can have almost limitless sustain. And it makes this build incredibly good, in my opinion, for specifically 1vx, because you can fight outnumbered and use it to your advantage if you can get those kills. So I think that Onslaught is really, really good on the Stamina Dragonknight. One of, if not the best ultimate that we can run on the Greatsword bar. And I think something that I want to mention for this too is that if you're fighting NPCs, you can cap off NPCs with Onslaught to return a lot of resource and steal their armor as well. So it allows you to really turn fights that aren't in your favor just because it has such a unique functionality on the Dragonknight, returning the resource with Battle Roar as well. And now taking a look at our bow bar, this is our kite slash offensive set bar. So we're going to set our combos on this bar and stay mobile with it as well. The first ability we have, of course, is Poison Injection. This is going to be your primary damage over time for this build. It's very cheap. It has a decent upfront damage and then 8k poison damage over 10 seconds, drastically increasing in strength as your opponent's health begins to drop. Such a good ability for a burst build. We can get massive poison injection ticks, and it means that if someone dodges our execute, they might go down to the poison injection tick because they rolled. So a really great skill on the DK, and DK of course has really good poison damage in general. Now the next ability we have is Magnum Shot. This is the primary stun for the build, the primary combo setter as well. We talked about this with our bow. Not only will it deal the upfront damage, and it has a pretty impressive tooltip, but it will also deal 50% of that damage every 2 seconds, depending on how far away you were when they hit them. So you can add a lot of pressure to your opponent if you get a nice big Magnum Shot crit on them into a crit rush. I mean, really beautiful. And then that knockback effect, you make a minimum of 12 meters of distance between you and the target, giving you a minimum of a 20% damage bonus on crit rush if you use it following the Magnum Shot. So a really great synergistic skill for our gap closer as well. And yeah, it also synergizes with the weapons we're using. Really, really good ability for this spec. Now you can go for the healing morph if you want here. I picked Magnum Shot because the Black Rose bow is dependent on how much base damage we deal. And of course the healing morph has less damage than the Magnum Shot. So we essentially gimp our base damage and we gimp the dot damage if we go for the heal. However, the heal is really strong. I think this build has more than enough healing power though. You really don't need to run the other morph. And the movement aspect of Magnum Shot synergizes really well with the spec we're running too. Now the next ability we have is Resolving Vigor. We're going to fully buff this so you guys can see the Vigor tooltip on this build as well. And as you can see on our bow bar, we've got nearly an 18k Vigor. And if we go over to our Greatsword bar, you guys can see that we've got a almost 21k Vigor on this build. So we've actually got a really strong Vigor for this spec. Lots of healing power for this build. Like I said, this is your oh crap heal. Is not the heal that you want to go to at first all the time. You want to get used to using Rally as often as possible, and if you need that extra healing power, you go for Vigor when you need it. Now, the next ability we have is Fragmented Shield. There are a few reasons that we're running this skill, but the most obvious one is for that major mending. 25% additional healing for 5.4 seconds. Such a big deal. That's a lot of additional healing power. It synergizes really well with Vigor. It synergizes really well with our Rally Burst as well. So we get really nice healing power thanks to having this skill slotted. Now, the second reason we run this is for the Minor Brutality. This is the only ability that gives us Minor Brutality via our Earthen Heart passives. So we definitely need this in order to push the highest damage and healing that we can anyway. And then finally, guys, the last normal skill that we have is Reflective Plate. This is your most powerful defensive utility skill on this build. You get to reflect up to 4 projectiles for 6 seconds, and you gain immunity to snares and immobilizations for 2 seconds. This is such a huge deal. It allows you to stay very, very mobile on this build, and not only that, but it makes you relatively safe while you're sprinting away from ranged targets. That's a massive deal because a medium armor build can really struggle if it has to sprint away from a lot of ranged targets, and this can shut them down super hard. So I really like Reflective Plate on this build. You guys will see in the gameplay how big of a deal this skill is and how big of an impact it makes on our Dragonknight. This ability allows our squishy Dragonknight to be somewhat tanky because of how much damage we can reflect and prevent using the wings. And then, of course, that snare and immobilization, so important to have that immunity for solo PvP especially. And then finally, guys, for the ultimate we're running, we have got Corrosive Armor. And this pairs super well with Onslaught because both of our ultimates are armor piercing or armor ignoring. That's a massive deal because it allows us to have some really high burst against very tanky targets. And they don't really expect it. If you're quick with the Corrosive Armor, you could hit someone for a really huge combo, crit rush, into the Executioner, and you will just cut through them like butter. I mean, ignoring all physical resistance is absolutely massive. And then, of course, this caps the incoming damage you take at 3% of your max health and deals a poison dot to everyone each second while it's up. I think that capped at max health is really important to note too because it can make this build actually tanky for a period of time. You can be pretty much invincible if you have 4 or 5 people beating on you. Any more than that, they could still kill you through the Corrosive Armor, so you got to be careful. But man, if you throw this armor up and go for 1 Vigor, you're pretty much not going to take damage, and you cut through people like butter. So such a fantastic ultimate for this build, and I really like the combination of this with Onslaught because it means that no matter what ultimate we use, offensive or defensive, we are set up to kill high resistance opponents, and that is exactly what you want on a burst build in PvP. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the champion points on this build. Starting off in our tower tree, we've got 28 Warlord, 14 Sprinter, and 3 Bashing Focus. Focus on Warlord here because we gotta break free. We also have to sprint and just a little bit in Bashing because I had a few points left over. Taking a look at our lover tree, you can see we are reflecting the fact that we've got just nice sustain across the board. Focus, of course, on Mooncalf. We've got more points here for the 12%, and then Arcanist Healthy for 9% increased recovery as well to our health and magicka recovery. The important passive we get is Wind Running. It increases our health and magicka recovery while sprinting, which is really worth noting because we'll do a lot of sprinting on this build. And then, of course, we have 2% movement speed coming from this. All in all, this build is sitting at a 97% movement speed bonus, which puts it just shy of the movement speed cap while sprinting. So really mobile build, very, very fast, I think, which is great for it too. Now, taking a look at the Shadow Tree, we've got 51 Tumbling and 44 in Shadow Ward. Nice even split here because we have to roll and we have to block. We got a lot of well fitted on too, so we get rolling bonuses from that. So yeah, can't neglect either of these for PvP. In the blue tree, we have got nothing in the Apprentice. In our Atronach tree, we've got 81 Master at Arms and 39 Physical Weapon Expert. A pretty standard burst tree, of course, because all of our attacks are going to be direct damage, save the 2 dots that we have. So a lot of our burst is going to be affected by this, and the Physical Weapon Expert will affect both our bow and our greatsword damage. The important passive we get here is Tactician. We roll dodge to set an opponent off balance. It allows us to not only stun an opponent with a heavy attack when we set them off balance, but we also get a damage bonus thanks to the Exploiter passive in our next tree here. Now, taking a look at this tree, we've got 51 Precise Strikes, 50 in Piercing, and 49 in Mighty. A nice even spread here, which is exactly what you want for a burst tree. I put nothing in Thaum because we don't have a ton of dots on this build. They're more to set the combo, but we want to make sure that we actually hit really hard with our burst skills. And of course, all the dots will be buffed by these buffs here as well. So the important passives that we get here are Perfect Strike. You got to have that weapon crit. The Exploiter, like I said, 10% damage bonus against an off-balance enemy. And then Last Stand, fall below 20% health and you gain Major Heroism. That's a big deal because, well, it's PvP. You're going to fall below 20% health. And if you can come back from it, you get an alt gain, which is huge for the Dragonknight because we have Battle Roar. Now, taking a look at the Steed tree, we've got 51 Ironclad, 56 in Resistant, 44 Medium Armor Focus, and 6 in Spell Shield. So we actually have a big focus on Ironclad and Resistant just to bulk our defense against incoming direct damage and bulk our defense against incoming criticals. Very important in PvP as a lot of burst is going to be these things. And with our squishier build, we're really susceptible more to burst than anything else. So that's why we focus there. Spell Shield and Medium Armor Focus. I like this point placement here because DK actually gets 3k innate spell resistance. So we just make up for that by putting much more points in the Medium Armor Focus, and we can omit Spell Shield to a degree, allowing us to have an equal spread between physical and spell resistance on this spec. And then taking a look at the lady, we've got 27 Hardy, 19 Elemental Defender, and 44 in Thick Skin. I focused on Hardy a little bit more because we have the Reflect, and a majority of physical damage is going to be melee distance damage. And then Elemental damage we didn't want to neglect either. I really put a lot in Thick Skin because, well, Dragonknight is kind of weak to damage over time. We don't have a Purge. We have really strong healing, so this is just going to mean that the damage is going to be less so that we can successfully out-heal it. This build actually is good against the dot meta, to be honest. We have enough healing power and enough kite ability to prevent ourselves from getting dotted up so hard that we can't really come back from it. In the Lord tree, guys, we've got 23 in Quick Recovery for that bonus to our healing received, just bulking up the heals on the build. And that is the build, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into that PvP commentary. So we're going to start off with a little bit of 1vx. We're going to quickly hit this guy off the horse, dot him up with our Poison Injection, the Magnum Shot, and then bring him down as he tries to escape in stealth there. And then we're just going to go back around the tree and reset our buffs for the last 2 here. Take the Wrecking Blow, but we're just going to break it, roll back through them again, and make sure we finish the buffs here. And then I pop my Corrosive Armor and dot this guy up with both of the dots, and then go for the crit rush into the Executioner there, and we bring down the Nightblade, and then we've got just this last player left here, and he tries to kite behind the tree. We're just going to hit him with the Magnum Shot into the Poison Injection, into the Executioner, and right away, we're flexing the power of this build. The next guy here, oh, poor level 17. I was feeling pretty savage at the time that we filmed this, and normally I wouldn't be so rude, but we're just going to kill him, and then we're going to head on to the next fight here, looking for more DC as we run around, and we see this guy on his horse. So I go for the poison injection right away, and he jumps off the horse. So I go for another poison injection and jump down, go for the magnum shot as we drop down there, and I'm just going to set my offensive buffs here, and he hits us with the fire staff knockback, and we hit him with the great sword ultimate. Down he goes. Oh my gosh, he really should have healed himself there. And now we're just going to continue to move around looking for DC here, and I work my way back up to this spot, and a lot of DC are now coming down from the mile gate, and we're just going to do our best to kite them out, making sure to keep the wings up here, reflecting a lot of nice attacks there. I really like this build because you can control the damage you take with wings and the reflect. The dodge roll on top of it, you can really control what projectiles you're eating and which ones you're reflecting as well. So it works really well on this spec, and we're just going to continue to use our wings and kite back here, and just look at how high we can keep our health bar. We rebuttal this guy's ambush with our magnum shot, hit him with the poison injection as well, and just look at the dots tick away, and then we're going to hit him with the executioner there and bring this guy down, and we're just going to come back a little bit further here. This was one of the first fights I actually got in on this build, so there were a few moments where we could have gone for the greatsword ult for the finish, but it's okay. I'm still learning. Here we see I jump in the middle of the group. I go for the corrosive armor. We've got the armor pierce, and I just go for 2 executioners in a row. Look how much damage we do with the armor pierce. Just absolutely shred through that guy, and we bounce back here, cycling through the wings and our heals, and making sure to block as we travel through the air. It's going to help prevent a lot of incoming damage, and we're going to go continue to kite around, and look at the speed of this build. Such a clean split, and we just go right on top of that guy and bring him down. That massive critical splat on him, and we take another wrecking blow. I'm pretty sure we were out of distance from that, but it is a deadly stun. We don't have enough stam to continue to fight, and down we go. Just wanted to showcase you guys the damage of this build. So in the next clip here, we are in a friendly keep, and as you can see, we're going to get hit by an archer right away, and we're just going to go into our wings after breaking the CC, and then head up to the top of this tower because, well, we got to clean these guys out of here. So we set our buffs as we go upstairs, take a fear from the Nightblade trap, so we just go back around the other side, go into the wings, and go for a hop into that bow heavy. The hop bow heavy is so nice because it lets us set a nice big partial heavy into a fully charged heavy combo, and we just can travel so much distance so quickly. Really good idea to use that. There we see the magnum shot into the greatsword ultimate, the executioner, quickly bringing that guy down. This guy here is on siege. We just dot him up real fast, go into the crit rush, executioner, and I think the poison injection dot finishes him off there. Quickly finish off this guy here. He's lower HP. He had just gotten rezzed, and the rest of the yellow are trying to res their dead here. We're going to just poison inject that one, stun him, go for a magnum shot on the other player to stun them as well, but he responds well with the dodge roll, and the enemy warden goes into his ultimate here, so I reset my buffs and then head back towards the warden, just trying to dot him up here, actually just going for the executioner. There's the greatsword ultimate to finish him off as he drops off the edge there. Just kind of a death sentence to drop at that HP anyway, and the last Nightblade ends up running off as more yellow work their way into this tower, and we're just going to do our best to hold it out here. We see the 2 guys come up. We just try to dot them up here, but they're looking to try to pick up these dead bodies. I go for the greatsword ult on the first player here, and he actually blocks it, I think, so he mitigates a huge amount of damage, but look at that combo. We just kill another player there with a nice combo, bringing him down, and we're just going to reset our buffs yet again, go into the wings to stay mobile. The wings so important for this build, and we're going to dot up this warden and just be stuck in his trap for a little bit. I'm going to work my way up top, seeing this guy has been rezzed yet again. We try to put some damage into him, but we get caught by a nasty pull there, and damn, look at that damage. Not really sure if we got desynced or not because we didn't have the biggest tooltips on the death recap, but that's all right. Moving on to the next fight, guys. We have got a nice long fight. This is actually the last clip for this video, but it's quite a long resource defense on this build, and you get to see a little bit more intimate action of this spec, and as you can see here, there's a lot of yellow kind of on this resource. We quickly finish off the first player there. Actually, the other DK that's here with me finishes him off, and I'm just going to try to rotate on these guys. Go for a stun off on this Nightblade there, into the greatsword ultimate. Go for my executioner, and look at how my character's holding the sword. We get a little bit of lag there, and I'm actually unable to capitalize on the finish on that Nightblade, so I'm just going to reset my buffs, reset my wings, and we're going to re-engage with these guys. And a big thing about this clip that I want to show you guys is how hard we can counter the snipe spam. We can really shut down snipers on this build, and they have a really tough time engaging with us just because of how high our wing uptime is on this spec. So as you can see, we have a very tanky AD player there. I actually get hit by a dot, I think, that breaks me there, that stuns me, and we're just going to have to continue to deal with these snipers from the back here. Getting hit by the dot again, it's because the character's going into sneak, so his dot is actually counting as a stun from stealth. So we're just going to continue to pressure this Templar here. I put some decent knockback into her, put the dots on, but the Templar is very, very tanky, and she's right next to a very tanky Dragonknight as well. So those two are going to work in conjunction to keep each other alive, and I'm just going to continue to try to dot them up, but I'm very conscientious of the snipers, and there we see both the snipers hitting me with the arrows. We're making sure to keep the wings up here, getting huge reflects on this snipe, go into the corrosive armor, and we just light attack Executioner. Look at the damage to bring those guys down. Oh my lord, we just cut through them like butter. And now I'm going to focus my attention back on these two very tanky players that are fighting the other Dragonknight here. And this is honestly just fighting tanks. You just have to be patient. We need our ults up in order to cut their armor really well. So we're just going to continue to dot up both of them, try to stun them as much as we can, and just crit rush, etc. Just apply the pressure that we can. And there we see our chance. This guy gets hit by the stun. I go for the fully charged heavy attack into the Greatsword ultimate, and he's so bulky. Oh my lord. I think he even caught a heal from a friendly yellow player up top there. So I actually decide that I'm going to move around the side here, and we're going to go up top and try to bring this guy down as the other DK leaps on top of him, quickly finishing off that other player. And I decide to just leave the tanks alone for now because we've got more yellow players on this resource, and we need to keep them from flipping this flag, because the last thing we need is a bunch of NPCs negating us and stuff. So I just wait on the flag a bit. The yellow don't reappear, so I just go to continue to dot and stun these guys, and there's the snipe from stealth there. We go right away into the wings, and this guy goes into melee distance. We hit him with the partial charged heavy. He is off balance, so we get a stun off there, and I make sure to go into my wings so I can shut down his ranged kit. And now we're just going to continue to apply pressure to this guy, cycling our wings as we dot him up. And there we see he takes a nasty amount of damage from that light attack Executioner, and he's struggling here. He tries to get away. We hit him with the Magnum shot into the poison injection. He drops his Dawnbreaker. We're just going to hit him with the Greatsword ult, returning resource on the kill there as well. And now we're going to come back this way. We notice a sniper up top, and I just quickly knock him back there, and I see more arrows as well. And I'm just being conscientious of the snipers here, doing my best to shut them down. Another yellow sniper in the back there, so just going to be patient and wait for him to engage with us, and then try to get a good counter on the wings. So I come back to the tanky players here, and I just start reapplying dots to them, etc. And just keeping my wings up, being conscientious of the snipers around me. The tanky players just continue to tank it out, so no snipers engage. I move off to the side here. We've got two enemies up top here. I go for the dots on this player here, hit him, go into my wings. He goes for his ultimate, and I go into my corrosive armor, and here is where you see the tank burn. Look at how much damage we do to him after the corrosive armor. The Executioner just through his block, dealing nice damage there. The Earth Gore, the 12k Executioner to finish him off as another EP player comes and finishes off that other tanky player, and we finally managed to bring the two tanks down. And there's one last guy on the resource here. It's the Templar from earlier. We hit him with the poison injection, the Magnum shot, and that guy is so squishy. He goes down to those attacks. Now, just a little bit of time goes by, and yellow starts working their way towards their flagged keep here. And we see this Sork trying to streak through. I hit him with the Greatsword ultimate. We kill him as he falls off the edge with the Executioner. A funky little kill there to bring that guy down. And now we've got a lot of yellow working their way into this keep. So me and this other DK decide, all right, we're going to try to hold the front door of this keep and prevent yellow from getting in. The first Sork comes by, and she does a great job. I actually go for the crit rush and hit her pet, but she just continues to keep her shields up and moves towards the door and makes it inside. A Nightblade comes from behind there. We try to stun him, but it does not work. This guy, lower HP. We hit him with the poison injection. The friendly player leaping on top of him, bringing him down, and we've got more and more yellow coming here. We stun this guy into the poison injection, get hurt by the Dawnbreaker from behind there, so we're just going to roll back through that player and reset our buffs here as we just kind of tank this out and go into our wings to break a little bit of distance from these guys. The enemy Warden coming in with his AoEs as well, so I decide, okay, we're going to go for a bit of a kite, try to split this group as we've got two melee chasers, and there we see we managed to pull this guy away These two away. The friendly Dragonknight bringing down another player there. I go into the corrosive armor and just look at the damage. Oh my god. Down that guy goes so fast. The armor pierce is incredibly powerful. And we're just going to put some work into the rest of these guys. This guy here trying to tank it out. We still have that armor pierce. He goes down as well. And that is all of the footage that I have for you guys. We're just going to replay the intro clip here as we say our goodbyes. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like I said, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I play live on Twitch if you guys want to come by and see the gameplay when it's actually happening. I think I only spent 3 days on this build, and I do plan on playing it more. So if you want to see more of this build in action, I will be playing it shortly after the release of this build as well. And we feature community content. If you guys want to send in a clip to be featured in a top 5 battles or send in your own build to be featured on the channel, you guys can send that in to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. And finally, guys, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers, and they give me better ping to ESO. They're 100% free to try for the first 14 days. No credit card at all to sign up. So if you guys want to give it a shot, especially my Aussie friends who I know have struggles with ping to their favorite US-based games, I would recommend giving them a shot. So thank you guys again for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed this build, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great night, everyone.